Today, I'm going to talk about finding strength in imposter syndrome. And it is actually quite an interesting topic for me to talk about because if you've asked me a year, 2 years ago about imposter syndrome, I would have told you, I don't know what that is. I've never had that. But then I was very humbled the past year and I found out that imposter syndrome also affected me. So we're going to talk a bit about that today, and I'm going to chat about how this imposter syndrome came. I'm going to talk a little bit about my career so far and some insights that I had to turn imposter syndrome into something that can be a positive catalysator. So Jeff already introduced me. I'm a senior product designer at Zalando. I switched my career in 2017. So I already saw in the survey some people saying that they're the first designer in the family. They do not have a design degree. I am also like that. I don't have a design degree. I am also the first person in my family to have even a university degree. So I can really relate to what is said there. I actually have a background in art history, and only after 2017, I switched to UX design. And that's also how I got so passionate about helping other people to switch their careers and help you get started in UX, because I knew that when I started out in UX, I found that really difficult. I did not know many UX designers, and felt really lost at times. So let's have a little look on how that beginning of my career looked like, or the beginning of my design career. As I said, I switched my career in 2017. Before that, I worked at a startup for almost 2 years where I worked in marketing. I didn't like it. I felt very unsatisfied in my role. And so I decided that I wanted to do something where I could work on a product or on something that would really help people. And the reason I'm a UX designer is actually because I did take advice from my dad, and not from Keanu Reeves. And it was my dad who told me that UX design could be something that could really fit me and I should look into it. And after him telling me this for a couple of years, I finally listened, and I'm very happy I did, because I'm very happy in this career. So after I did an online course, I started looking for my first job, an entry level job, and I got that in the beginning of 2018, where I landed my first UX design role at an agency here in Berlin. And the beginning of my career very much looked like this picture. Everything was new. I felt energized. I was very curious and very happy to start this new career. And it felt like, and that's why I call it in the green fields, because it felt like my personal greenfield project. And a greenfield project is where you have no biases, no restrictions from previous things. And that's how my career also felt, completely new and fresh. And I was very motivated to start learning new things. And I, funnily enough, did not notice much of imposter syndrome at this point in time, probably because I was too ignorant looking back on it. But I really enjoyed this position of being a beginner. I really felt the freedom to ask many questions, to make mistakes. I was also very lucky to have managers around me that trusted me a lot and that also really supported me in that beginning journey and supported me to make mistakes. What I did notice is that I had a hard time making the jump from the UX theory that I've learned to the reality that all of a sudden I was working in. So I noticed when I started working in an agency that design processes are very chaotic, and they're not just a simple 5-step process that everyone makes it look like it is. Design thinking is not just a simple switch in your head. And I was especially challenged by the time always being short. The budgets are tight. So I did not have much time as I wanted to invest in wireframing. We might not have all the money to do research. So the reality of working as a UX designer was very different from how I imagined it when I was studying. However, it was very exciting to me, and every step felt like a victory because I was in this learning mindset, and every new thing that I was doing, I was soaking in new knowledge, and that actually made me feel more confident than that it made me feel more insecure. And while I was writing this, I was thinking about this saying that people say that the more experience you have or the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know much. And that definitely applies to me. I think back then, because I didn't know that much yet, I wasn't really so blocked by it. I was just soaking in everything like a sponge. And so that is how it would go for the next few years. I started as a junior UX designer. Then in the following years, I grew up as a designer. I grew into a mid-level role. I was still at the agency. I had the opportunity to be part of more projects, to also get more responsibility. And I really felt like my career was going in one upward line. I was really happy with that. So as I was settling in to the mid-level stage of my career, I started to get really settled. Was learning more and more, and the more experience I got, the more confidence I would also get. And in hindsight, I was at some point starting to feel a little bit lazy and a little bit too comfortable because I started to learn the tricks of the trade. I started to kind of figure out what I needed to do. I started to kind of understand the design process and navigate this chaos that was overwhelming to me in the beginning. And it really at some point started to feel like tricks that I was just performing the same kind of tricks in my career to get by and to get to a solution. So I grew a bit too comfortable. I was relying on what I already knew. And through that, I also lost a little bit of interest in learning more. This thirst for learning, I kind of lost it. And I think a career always goes up and down. You have phases that are a bit more steady, and then you have phases where a lot of things are happening and where you go through a big growth or a big point of development. And this was definitely a point from like 2020 to 2021 where things were very steady for me and I was taking a bit of rest. But at some point, I realized, well, I'm taking a lot of rest. I now also just need to start learning a bit more again. I need to get out of this environment where I just feel a little bit stuck. And that is when I realized that I needed a new environment and I needed new input to also learn new things and to grow my career. So after being settled in, learning a few more things, I did some reflection and I thought, well, I think I've rested enough. It's time for the next step. And that was also my decision to then leave the agency that I had been working at for almost 3 years. And I had a really good time there. But I also realized that I wanted to work in a different environment. I wanted to know what it was like to work as an in house designer. Because before in the agency, I've always worked on different projects for different clients. And the cool thing about working in an agency is that you have this variety of projects and that you get the opportunity to work with different clients, with different people. So you also learn different problem spaces. You have a little look inside different companies and how they work. But I also wanted to know what it would be like to work as a designer on a product for a longer period of time, because that was the downside of working at an agency is that you're mostly there for the beginning phases of a product, but you don't really see this product come to fruition or maybe even come to the market, because then you would have already been moving on to the next project. So I thought for this new environment that I'm seeking out, I want to work at a more international environment and at a bigger company. In 2020, 21, I decided that I'm going to look for a different role. And that's how I landed my role at Zalando. And this was a very conscious choice. I wanted to work at Zalando because I've worked at Zalando before as a customer care agent. That's actually also why I grew so fond of UX design, because I really liked listening to people's problems and solving them. So I know that I wanted to work at a big company in Berlin. Zalando seemed like an obvious choice. I knew someone there that worked as a manager, and I looked up to her. So I also wanted to work together with her. And that was my first role in this new environment. And that led to me discovering new land. Moving to a big organization from a mid-sized agency is a shock to the system. At least it was for me, because all of a sudden I not only had to manage way more people and getting to know way more people, but I also had to learn the lingo that comes with a big organization, the ways of working that comes with a big organization, the design processes, the hierarchies. And it was a lot. It was a very steep learning curve. But this also gave me the opportunity to sharpen my soft skills. So in the first 3 years of my career, I was mostly focused on sharpening my UX craft, learning more about the tools that I was using, about the methods that I was using. And starting at Zalando was the opportunity for me to also start learning more about communication, about collaboration, because as you can imagine, when you're working with so many people, there are a lot of different agendas. There is more office politics to deal with. You have that in every company, but of course, the bigger the company, the more you will have to do stakeholder management. So I was navigating all of that while at the same time also working at an area that was completely new for me, because I started working at the B2B side of the business. So that is business to business. So before I would always work customer facing, and now all of a sudden my users were not the people buying jeans on Zalando, but the people selling jeans on Zalando. So that was also a very different kind of user and a very different kind of problem space. So again, I felt that spark like I felt in the beginning of my career, where I was learning a lot of different things, where all these first times felt like victories, and I was soaking in all of this new knowledge. And I was really happy for a while. But then all of a sudden I was thinking, well, I'm not so sure if I'm really happy in this B2B role, because I found that it is a very, at least that role that I was in, it was very technical and very complex. And it was very much into the solution design of things, whereas I found that I was more interested in the discovery phase and in more of the research phase. So I discussed with my manager that I would like to take a switch, which is possible at Zalando. You can move from one department to the other, which is also one of the reasons I wanted to work there, because I wanted to see this business from different perspectives. And that is how, in the summer of last year, I did an internal switch. I came to another team, and this team was basically like a agency within Zalando. So again, a variety of projects, a lot of different people that you're working together with. And the speed of work was way higher than is usual at a big organization. So I really threw myself in the deep end at that point. And this was also the point where I had been discussing with my manager that I would really like to get a promotion. I would really like to grow into a senior role. So as I was moving into this new team last year, that was when a lot of things came at the same time. I was working towards this promotion. I was starting yet again in a new team that had a very high pace of work, where I was working with a lot of different stakeholders, where I was working on projects with very high stakes that were very strategic. So again, I saw my role changing a bit. Before, I would be working more on very typical UX tasks like research, information architecture, user flows, wireframes. And now I found myself in projects that were very strategic and where it was way more about working together with people and selling ideas and working on visions rather than pushing pixels. And this was new to me. There were a lot of first times, but this time, these first times didn't feel exciting anymore, or they didn't feel like victories. They rather felt like mountains that were increasingly getting bigger and bigger. And I started to realize I have no clue what I'm doing, or at least I feel like I don't know anything. And that was the first time where this imposter syndrome really started to creep up on me. And in the beginning, I thought, well, like, no, come on, I got my promotion. I'm a senior product designer. You cannot feel imposter syndrome now. I'm a senior. I'm supposed to know everything, right? But actually, this feeling of believing that I needed to have all the answers and I needed to lead instead of learn, that is what was making me anxious. And I noticed this very strongly where at some point, whenever I would have a design review or a meeting, I would get really nervous and I would think, okay, you know what? This is the meeting where they will find out that I don't know anything, that I don't know what I'm doing, and where by the end of the meeting, they will say, this did not make any sense. And so I would go into the meeting with this self critique. And whenever we had the meetings and when I would get feedback, the feedback was very constructive, it was very positive, and that would only confuse me even more because I would be thinking, did I miss something? Did they miss something? How is it that they still not critiquing me? Like, are they not seeing it? And it would confuse me even more. And I started to feel quite alone with this feeling because I was thinking, well, I have everything that I want, right? I have this promotion. I never had this imposter syndrome. Why do I all of a sudden have it now? And I started to do a little bit of backtracking. And I started to think about what was my mindset when I started my career and what is my mindset right now. And then I came to the conclusion that when I started my career, I felt freedom in not knowing everything. I saw that as a benefit. I thought, well, if I don't know anything, there's only things for me to gain, right? Every new thing that I do, every new mistake that I make, I learn something new. Whereas at that point, at the point where I was feeling so anxious, I was thinking, there is no freedom in not knowing anything. It's more making me anxious because now instead of getting the encouragement of my managers to make mistakes, I now felt like my managers had a lot of expectations and they were counting on me to show them things and to tell them things. And that also led to me giving up my learning mindset and thinking that I had to only have a leading mindset, that I had to be the one that would come with all the answers. And that would mean that I couldn't learn anymore because I had to I had to know it already. Which, of course, when you think about it, it's nonsense. You can also lead and learn at the same time. So, whereas in the beginning of my career, every first time felt like a victory. Now, every first time felt like a big question mark. And at some point, I had so many question marks that I thought, will I ever have the time to find the answers? So I did a lot of digging within myself and questioning these things. And in the end, I came with some insights on how to turn this anxious feeling into something that is actually really positive and something that is a strength. And that is what I want to share with you. So I want to share 6 insights to find strength in imposter syndrome. Now, this is based on my personal journey. I think you can also apply it if you are in the beginning of your career, or maybe also when you already are a few more years into your career, more years than I am, because they are more things that are focused on your mindset. So the first thing, which is very logical when you think about it, is no one climbs the highest mountain on their own. And this is something that I really had to learn. I had to learn that I can ask for help. And this is something that I usually find very hard, because I had this belief that I had to be able to do everything on my own. And I, in the past, I also got positive feedback for being proactive, for figuring things out on my own, for being so hands on. But at some point, I realized that this belief was actually blocking me from asking for the help that I did need. And I realized that when I started asking my colleagues for help, or started to learn more from their experience because they were more experienced than me, or had different expertise, it actually made the team stronger and it made the work better, because it also allowed others to bring in their expertise. So I realized, hey, I don't need to do everything on my own. And with that, I also realized there is a lot of freedom in saying, I don't know. And this is something that I am practicing a lot more now. So now, whenever I'm in a meeting and someone asks a question that I don't know, I will just say, I don't know. And there is so much freedom in that, because you don't feel so stressed anymore in always having the answers ready. And it also builds way more trust, because you cannot know everything. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so many people at Zalando working on the same problem space. So the second insight is there's a lot of freedom in saying, I don't know. And it feels weird to say that in the beginning, because you're thinking, well, if I'm going to admit that I don't know this, are they still going to take me seriously? But in my experience, they actually take you more serious when you admit that you don't know something. Then, related to this, is that sharing with others builds trust. So, these feelings that I had, and this anxiety, and these question marks in my mind, I would keep them for myself for a long time, because I was thinking, if I'm going to share this with my manager, or with the colleagues that I'm working with on this project, then maybe they are going to doubt me, or maybe they will lose trust in me, because they will find out that I'm insecure about this, or maybe they will even think that I didn't deserve my promotion. And when I started sharing what I was going through, that was actually after work. We went for a drink and we started to talk with our colleagues, and I started to tell them what I was going through. And that is actually where I found out, hey, they trust me even more now. Because they know what I'm going through. So the second insight is sharing with others builds trust. Then I saw this image didn't load, but that will not take away from the insight, because the insight is being a newbie is actually a gift. And this realization really helped me find strength in imposter syndrome, because whenever you feel like you don't know anything, or you're just trying things for the first time, or you're scared that people will find out that you're also just winging it, that is very anxiety inducing. But it's also an opportunity, because when you're doing things for the first time, that also means that you have a fresh pair of eyes, that you're looking at things from a different perspective, that you're asking questions that other people might not ask anymore. And I talked about this with a colleague, and he said that it's like an artist that spends the rest of their life coming back to that first insight they had when they first made their big artwork. And for the rest of their life, they're trying to get that spark again. And that made me realize that feeling like the dumbest person in the room is actually also a good thing, because that means that there are a lot of people in the room that you can learn from. And it doesn't mean that you're dumb. It means that there are more experienced persons with you that you can learn from. So being a newbie is a gift, and it actually is something that you can and should celebrate and should hold on to, and be aware of how you can keep that beginner's mindset and how you can keep questioning things and looking at things as if you are looking at them for the first time. That also led to me realizing that you can lead and learn at the same time. So I think the reason why I didn't feel so much imposter syndrome in the beginning of my career is because I was thinking, well, I'm just here to learn. I'm here to learn and make mistakes. And no one is expecting anything from me just yet. They're just expecting me to learn and make mistakes. But the more that you progress in your career, the more you also come into positions where you need to take the lead or where you need to show things. And I had the idea that it was either learning or leading, whereas it can also happen at the same time. And I already mentioned this before, but what I really realize is that the more experience I get and the more responsibilities I get, the more I realize all the things that I don't know. And I also realize that I can never stop learning. If I want to lead, I will need to continue learning. Then the last insight, and I think this one is a bit difficult and hard to nail, is that you will need to find a balance between comfort and pain. So, in the beginning, as I was settling into my career and I was in this mid level role, that is where I was a little bit too comfortable. And that's why I wasn't growing. But if I would have stayed in this anxiousness that I felt last year, it would have become too painful. And that can lead to burnout or you losing your motivation or your passion for your work. So, luckily, that didn't happen to me. I did feel anxious at times, but I never felt burnt out. And I think tapping in with yourself and realizing where on the scale of comfort and pain am I now? If it's too comfortable, seek out a little bit more pain, but don't be in agonizing pain 24/7 because then you're also not going to grow. So seek out enough exposure to new challenges, but don't get paralyzed by it. I found is what really helped me. So to wrap this up, I'm now at a point in my career where I have accepted that there are a lot of things that I don't know, and I find strength in them. I don't feel anxious anymore whenever I have a meeting. I can take the constructive feedback and not think, where is the criticism? Are you missing something? So I'm now at a better place than I was a few months ago. And I think it's because of these insights that I had. I think it's because realizing that it is okay to ask for help. It's actually really important to ask for help. It is okay to be transparent with how you think about your work and how you're showing up at work with your managers. The more you share, the more they also know and they can support you in that. And realizing that you don't have to do all of this on your own and you don't have to have all the answers right away. You can also learn while you do it and try to keep that spark of victory when you're trying to do something for the first time. Don't only like you can still see it as a mountain, but one that you feel excited about climbing and not one that makes you feel like I'm not going to survive this. So those were the 6 insights that I had. That was it from my side, but I'm very curious to now hear your stories, any imposter syndrome experiences that you have and what we can learn from that and how you overcame that. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jack. And yeah, looking forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Maureen. The chat was just going off the entire time of people really feeling empathetic to your experience and these mountains that you were climbing. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know, some of this is some private affairs you went through on your own, and we really appreciate you being brave to share that with us and help us learn from your experience. I just put in the chat the link so you can ask a question or vote. So I'm going to add myself to the spotlight. So one of the questions that's upvoted the most, and I think this is a really interesting one. And I know for a fact that Maureen, you're really good at this question. So I'm going to jump into this one. So how did you track your progress over time? How did you document your work, learning, or leading on a daily or weekly basis? And I know you're a big Notion fan and things like that. So yeah, any tips you can give
Exactly.
us there?
I was going to say Notion. So, one thing that really helped me was that I started keeping a weekly diary when I started at Zalando. So, I would write down every week by the end of the week what I learned, what my wins were, but also the things that I found difficult. And that gave me more insight into how I was doing and how I was progressing. So, keeping like a weekly report is something that I would recommend. The other thing that also really helped was for me to very openly communicate with my managers what my goals are. This is something that I always prioritize throughout my whole career. I always told my managers what it is that I want to do, where I want to grow towards, and asked them to help me support with that. So that is also something that has really helped me. I think one of the points that also led to me feeling like an imposter was that at some point, when you're in such a big organization, you don't have that many people holding your hand anymore, as I had that in the agency. So all of a sudden, I was really responsible for keeping track of my career goals. And I didn't really have a manager anymore that would ask me every time, well, how are your career goals looking? Because it was expected that I would do that on my own. And that would also lead to me kind of losing overview of what I wanted to do and what I was growing towards. And that I think led to, if you have less overview of all your achievements, you're feeling like, am I actually achieving something, or is it all just, am I not doing anything here? So I would say really keep track of your achievements. I heard about an article that someone wrote where they call this a brag document. So whenever someone gives you a compliment or whenever you get positive feedback, write that down, keep track of all your achievements so that you can also see in which direction you're growing. And that would also make it easier to distill goals from that.
That's very good advice. And I know, when you get ready to update that resume, you'll be very happy that you've kept that somewhere because it's just a copy paste. And yeah, I also like the point you made about keeping in communication with your managers. I think this is very important and maybe a good place to tackle some of this imposter syndrome before it gets out of hand. So that's such a great response. I love that. Okay, another one that's really voted here is tips and tricks on time management.
Mm, I love this question. I had my mentee at Solano ask me the same thing. I For me, this was something that came with experience. But what really helped was that at the agency that I was working at in the beginning, we had to track every hour that we were working and we had to write down what we were doing. But it was also really helpful for me because it would give me data on how much time would I spend on coming up with user interview questions, or how much time would I spend on wireframing. So I would suggest that you start tracking your time so that you get some insights into what it is that takes a lot of your time, so that you then also can focus more on practicing these skills. If you find that you spend a lot of time on wireframing, you can start looking into, are there wireframing kits that you can use, or are there certain patterns that you can use so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel the whole time. So I think get insight into what it is that takes a lot of time, and then create an action plan on how you can improve that.
Great. Yeah, I think that's another good one when you're kind of getting some personal data for yourself. I like that a lot. Okay, this is quite upvoted. This may be a difficult one to answer. So,
Mhm.
what made you think slash feel you were ready for a senior role? And were there certain milestones you had to meet beforehand?
What made me feel like I was ready for a senior role? Arrogant? I think I was just thinking like, I want to have a senior role. It's been 5 years. So
Mm,
I think that was it. But also, I think at some point you realize that the hunger for having an impact on the company grows. So in the beginning of your career, you're really focused on having an impact, maybe on feature level, right? You're working on wireframes, you're supporting people, but the more that you grow, the more you realize that you're getting projects where you have the possibility to have a department-wide impact or a company-wide impact. And I felt like I was ready for these projects that had a bigger impact. I wanted to do this. So that also led to me wanting to have a promotion. And I forgot what was the second question?
And what milestones were you
Oh yeah.
working towards?
Yeah. So at Zalando we have very detailed documents that exactly say what you need to be doing if you want to get into a certain role. I'm not allowed to share all the details, but there are some things that I see that seniors have in general. So I think you can use that. So what I found was that seniority, of course, has to do with a certain level of skill and a certain level of efficiency, but it's even more so about a mindset. So also guiding others, helping non design colleagues see the value of design and collaborating. It is very much linked to these soft skills that I have said in the beginning, also, where I was learning more about communication, more about collaboration. I see with a lot of senior designers that they also spend a considerate amount of time into the community at the company. So doing talks, offering mentorship, and learning programs. So again, I think if you want to grow into a senior role, it is a good way to start thinking about how can you improve your impact in the company in such a way that it is visible, because that's also one thing. If you want to get, you will need to prove why people need to promote you. So you will need to have very concrete things where you can say, well, this is what I did and it helped this project, it helped these people. So try to find things that have high visibility.
And I'm hearing really proactive ways to go about this too from you, not just waiting around, for that 5-year mark or some arbitrary dead thing milestone like that. And that definitely rings through my career as well. This time in chair, 5 years is not nearly as important as the soft skills and the impact you're having in the company. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. And yeah, such detailed ways to do this. I think you're very systematic in this. So I think it's very helpful for us. Okay, so this is something that they're curious about, upvoted quite a bit, is do you have a mentor, and how did you initiate that relationship?
I have, I would say, informal mentors. So what I found is that a lot of people see mentorship as one particular person that you then need to ask, do you want to be my mentor? And found that I do have a lot of people in my life that I consider mentors, even though that is not the official relationship we might have. So I'm in contact with Rob from Be the Leap, who does a lot of design sprints, and I definitely consider him a mentor because he has so much experience. And I had a lot of talks with him on how I could grow my career. And the way I established that relationship was not by reaching out to him and asking him, do you want to be my mentor? But by reaching out to him and saying, hey, we both are in Berlin. I really am impressed with what Leap is doing. Would you like to go for a coffee? And start establishing these relationships like that. I also have, I also see mentors in my direct colleagues by learning from them, by learning from their experiences, by hearing their personal stories. So a mentor can be a lot of different people that you don't need to even know personally. Like I would even say like people that I read their LinkedIn posts. I learn so much from them. They are not my official mentor, but I think there are finding people that have experience in an area that you want to grow into. That I found very useful. I have talked with someone on ADP list as well, but I found for me personally, I don't like this very official mentor mentee role. So I more find that through like personal connections or friendships that then grow into a more mentoring aspect or can have a mentoring aspect.
Yeah, so I'm hearing kind of an organic approach to it, maybe not attaching a hard title to that sort of thing. And I love
Yeah.
this idea of like crowdsourcing the mentorship and letting several people in. I put your LinkedIn in the chat, Maureen. So if others want to use your your LinkedIn as mentorship. I also mentioned earlier your newsletter. I wanted to make sure that I got that in the chat. So this is Maureen's newsletter. Just put that there in the chat. Okay, so I think we have time for one quick this one, how do you sell your skills to recruiters to switch from multiple projects when you change into an organization? Yeah, how do you sell your skills? And then did you deal with recruiters?
So I have had contact with recruiters. I did not get a job position through recruiters. It has been through my network, which is why I think building a network is really important. Staying in contact with people that you've worked with before is really important. That's how I got my job at Zalando through an ex-colleague. But I think in any way, in whatever person you're talking with, if you want to show your skills or sell yourself, I think what is important is to, again, coming back to visibility. So making, finding ways to have an impact that's visible. And if that's not possible at your current job yet, you can think about participating in hackathons. When Corona started, there were a lot of hackathons that were focused around testing, around getting visibility. So this is also how you can get an impact. You can get an impact through sharing your work online. You can get or not impact, visibility, or also impact through work, to sharing your work online. So I think selling yourself, in order to sell yourself, people first need to know you. And people can get to know you if you start sharing your stories, your studies, your challenges in a blog post, in a LinkedIn post, in a TikTok, in an Instagram, whatever platform works for you. So I think, yeah, getting visibility and then also working on impact are two important things for me, at least, to that help me sell myself into a new role.
That's great. Yeah, and I think you've done a very great job of that. And I appreciate that you share that with your community, that you build that up. So yeah, I just want to thank you again for the talk. Really appreciate all the insights, the beautiful slides, and the personal stories that you told. So thanks so much, Marie. So just wanted to give you a little bit of time here at the end to do a little networking. So kind of to connect with what Maureen was just, when you're thinking about getting visibility and sharing your ideas, I think it can be really important to have a safe space to do that. And so here at the Fountain Institute, we have a Slack group called the Guild of Working Designers. And this is kind of what helps organize this meetup. You can scan that QR code or go to bit.ly/Guild of Working Designers or this link in the chat. Feel free to join that. Then you can kind of connect, feel a safe space to share your ideas and get involved and kind of do some networking before the next meetup. Here at the Fountain Institute, our vision is a world that seeks designers for the way they think rather than what they produce. So thanks for coming out, everyone. Really appreciate your attention, and we will see you very soon for the next meeting.
Thank you all. Bye bye.